Hi, welcome to the recording for Building for Growth, where we're going to look at serious growth for small builders and trade businesses in what is becoming a very challenging market. So we're going to cover a few topics, a few ideas, and a few challenges. At the end of this recording, pick one area that you think you can improve in your business and focus on that for the next month. Whichever one you choose, it will help your business move forward. The problem that most trades and construction businesses have is they don't have, in their mind, they don't have enough time to take action. When you do have enough time, right? What you don't have is the priority. And if you don't change, well, nothing's going to change, as obvious as that sounds, right? And this is why a lot of the smaller trades businesses just hit the same problem again and again. They wonder why the problems repeat because they're not taking any action. And I'm going to help you on taking that action. So, what's the biggest challenge that you face right now in your business, in your industry, but particularly in your business? What's the biggest challenge you're facing right now? Let me know what that is, right? We're almost certainly going to touch on it in this recording, but email me, message me through LinkedIn, whatever suits you best, text me, whatever. You'll have my contact details. What is your biggest challenge right now? And then when we're doing the live recording, I always ask, what are you wanting to get out of this? What you want to get out of tonight, right? So what you want to get out of this recording? What do you want to take away from it? So think about that very carefully. So a bit about me to get started. What gives me the right to come on here and tell you how to run your business, right? So my business story was in the printing industry, which is bizarrely very similar to the construction industry with the challenges that we face. I grew that business to become the largest chain of independent print centres in the country. That business was absolutely flying, but despite that mass success, a business punching way above its weight, that business failed in its 20th birthday. And it failed because of eight avoidable mistakes that I was making as that business grew. And we had 13 print centres throughout the country. It was a big business. Eight avoidable mistakes that started the perfect storm. Now, what I didn't realize until after the fact is all those eight mistakes were 100% avoidable. I mean, you look back with hindsight, so bloody obvious as well. So that's why I wrote the book about it, how to write your business, because I'm good at it. And it dives into all the stuff we got right, all the stuff we got wrong, puts it together in one book. So it's a really abrupt lesson on business. So there was 20 years there of building and growing and scaling. I also had 5 years after I lost my business. I joined one of our competitors. They were subsequently acquired by the largest print chain in the world, massive organization. So I spent 5 years at corporate level, which was not me. Uh, and I then moved into business coaching, consulting, etc., and working with a lot of construction businesses. That was my baptism of fire into the construction trade. So I've been doing that for 10 years now. Published a number of books, two Amazon #1 bestsellers. So there's over 30 years of business experience there at the sharp end, right? I've been in the trenches. I've experienced the massive highs of business success, and I've experienced the ridiculous hull crushing lows of business failure and everything in between. So, gift #1 is if you're attending the event, if you're watching the recording, message me through LinkedIn's probably the best way, and I'll send you a free copy, signed copy of how to wreck your business. Signed copy worth a fortune one day. Now, before I start on the kind of topics of the recording, this recording, this event will do nothing for your business. I'm as well getting that out of the way right now. It's going to do nothing for your business because what makes a difference to your business is the action you take. And you're probably thinking, well, obviously, right? But you'd be surprised the number of people that come along to events, to workshops, to whatever it might be, and just expecting magic to happen. So what I do as part of this program is put together what I call a power hour. And the power hour is me working one to one with you, no charge. Right. So spaces for this are limited. The power hour allows you to pick whatever topic that you choose. It might be one of the ones I'm just about to cover, it might be something completely different, doesn't matter. It's what's important for you. And we dive really quite deep into that in the one to one sessions, right? It can be one topic, it can be two, it can be 10. It's your power hour. You tell me, right? So you pick the topic, we spend an hour exploring it and leaving you with a good number of actions that you can start to implement into your business. Completely free of charge. You'll absolutely love it. So let's dive into the the issues we see in the trade just now. So this is geared mainly for smaller trades, construction and building businesses, right? And some of these topics are generic, some are more specific, right, at the end. And that again, that's why the power hour is so important, especially when we come to the specific ones as well, right? Can't really do that in a workshop environment. It's got to be one-to-one. But let's look at one of the issues we hear a lot in the industry. We're really busy, but there's no money left. I'm crazy busy, but there's no money in the bank. So let's break that down. You can tell me if this sounds familiar. We're crazy busy. I know I'm making money, but there's never enough left over. So what's the reality of that? The reality is, yes, you're busy, but you're busy doing what? Because there is a big difference between being busy and being effective, right? And what we tend to find is when business owners, and I've fallen into this trap many times, you fall into the trap of you've got in your head they're making money, but you're thinking gross profit, right? And especially in the trades and building sector, it's a very easy mistake to do, right? So you've got a £5,000 job, your materials and your labour is 2.5 grand, 50%. So I'm making 50%, I'm making 2.5 grand, life is good, right? But that's the gross profit, right? Now, if you don't know what your gross profits are, well, there's the first problem we've got, right? But then we come to, but there's never enough left. Where does the money go? And the reason for that is we're not taking account the net profit, all the other costs associated with the business, right? We've got all the other wages, we've got our own salaries, our own dividends, we've got the vans, we've got the cars, we've got heat, light, power, fuel, rent rates, tax, national insurance, pension contributions, etc., etc. All those costs have got to be taken into account. And then we've got issues where we start to see overrun. We've got project creep, right? That's an absolute margin killer. Too much wastage on site that you may or may not be aware of, right? Perhaps there's unrealistic allowances for materials or perhaps time. I see this one a lot where you're keen to get the job. So instead of quoting sensibly for maybe 50 hours of labour, you put it for 45 or 40. It doesn't work, right? So we see that really eroding those margins as well. And then, of course, we've got snagging errors, etc. Where there's maybe callbacks. You have to go back to a client's house, whatever. All this is a massive, massive cost to the business, right? So these all together start to really answer the question. I know we're busy, but there's no money left. You've got to find out where that other money is actually going. So let's look at the house that Jack built to give you an example of this, right? So Jack's a builder and he, on average, 400K build price rather. So 400,000 is the average price for his homes. And Jack reckons he makes about 80K profit on each house. He's happy. Or is it as simple as that, right? So let's look at the model that the business has actually got. So the quoted price is 400,000. All direct labour and all materials for that home are 320,000, which gives Jack a gross profit of 80K, right? The business does 10 projects a year, which gives it a 4 million turnover, right? And you're probably thinking, that's 800K gross profit. That's okay. And if you look at the gross profit, what gross profit is the margin rather. If we look at the margins making on it, margins gross profit divided by revenue times 100. So if we take Jack's example, gross profit is 80,000, the revenue is 400,000. Divide that, multiplied by 100 is a 20% margin. Jack's happy with that. Now, let's now start to look at some of the factors that influence the reality, if you like, right? What Jack's not doing is he's not factoring in all of the costs for the business. So he's got it in his head, he's making 80,000 per home per build, which he is, but it's gross profit. Jack needs to factor in all the net costs, all the other costs that I mentioned running the business. And that is everything. It's all the other wages, it's the vehicles, it's the vans, it's the kit, it's all the other costs of running the business, right down to the stamps and the paper clips, if you still use them. So Jack knows he builds 10 homes per year, 4 million, and you know the cost there would give him 800K as a gross profit for the business. So let's start to pull this apart now, right? So Jack discovers that there's a number of factors now starting to play. He's now realizing he needs to allocate all these other costs to the business, right? So the business that turns over 4 million has got 360,000 in costs, right? So that's all other wages, that's the vehicles, everything we've just mentioned. 360,000 he reckons that costs over the year. Jack builds 10 houses a year, that's what gives him his 4 million turnover. So what he needs to do is take that 360 of cost, divide it by 10. So he needs to be allocating 36,000 of those costs to each of his projects because they just don't magically get paid. So he's got to really factor that into his profit. Jack also discovers there's a bit of project creep, right? There's a bit of project creep. Just but a number of things. It could be weather, it could be absolutely anything, right? We all start to see that, right? So Jack has got project creep coming in, and he reckons that's going to cost him somewhere in the region of maybe £5,000, right? What other costs then start to bear on this, right? So we now know that he's got to allocate the expenses of the business. We know there's a bit of project creep, and what he didn't realise as well was right at the start, and I'm sure we've all been there, customer haggled in price. And you had to give a bit of a discount. So you gave a 5% discount, thinking it's 5%, 400 grand project, 5% is okay if I get the business. But that's 20 grand, right? And the thing with discounting is every penny of it comes right off the bottom line. So now think of what we're now taking off Jack's 80 grand. 80,000 is now less than 36 for the cost. It's less 5,000 for the project creep, and it's less 20,000 the discount he did right at the start. That takes his profit down to 19,000, right? Not quite as sexy as the 80,000, is it? So 19,000 net profit on his 10 jobs, 190K for his 4 million turnover. It's a 4.75% net profit, right? And that's really why there tends to be maybe not no money left in the bank, but certainly less money than you expect. It's because you're not factoring in the expenses. You're not figuring out what your net profit is. Very few businesses in the construction trade sector do that. So one thing you've really got to start to focus on is understanding what the costs and expenses are for your business. That's the big takeaway from this first segment. There's three things that will kill your net profit. Not factoring all the costs, project creep and waste, and any form of discount, right? So your action here, this is pretty complicated, this one here. This is a good one for the power hour. Every business is different. So if you want to dive a little bit deeper into your cost base, then please use the power hour and take advantage of that. So this brings us on nicely to how to price jobs properly without losing work. And I always say to businesses in the sector, this is about getting better work, not more work. This goes back to being, oh, I'm really busy. We're all really busy. I'm busy being busy. I hate people saying being busy. Busy's got fuck all to do with it. Are you effective? It's not about getting more work, right? We always seem to think that we wear busy as a badge of honor, right? Oh, I'm working 14 hours a day. Great. Well, I'm working 6, making 10 times the amount of money you are. It's not about getting better. Sorry, it's not about getting more work. It's about getting better work, right? And I know that's not easy, but it's got to be the step that we take, right? Because most businesses, smaller businesses do find this a constant battle. So let's work how we work around that. Let's look at how we work around that, right? So the real key to this is twofold, right? Number one is you've got to make your entire business offering more about value and not about price. And you've got to stop pandering to price focused customers. You'll never win a race to the bottom, nor do you want to. But the key one here is stop making the conversation about price, stop making the marketing about price, and start to focus on value. Right now, we don't know what percentage here. These stats don't exist. Right, there are customers out there that buy purely on price, and there's customers out there that buy on value. Price will always be important, of course it will, but we've got to make it secondary. We've got to present our value. And I reckon it's about 25% of people will buy on price and nothing else. Price is the only factor they're interested in, and 75% will buy on value. Price will be important, right? But overall value is what they're looking for. So we know that the vast majority of people will buy on value. Now, before you get bent out of shape about that, think about this. It's about getting better work, not more work. Most in construction and trades don't have a pricing problem. You've got a positioning problem, right? And I've seen some really good examples recently of businesses I've worked with, and this is in the construction sector, so I know this works. When they're doing initial conversations and they're discussing anything about proposals and quotes and whatnot, they'll start to use phrases like, listen, we will be the cheapest. I just want to explain this now. We will not be the cheapest, but let me explain why that is, right? And then what they do is they go on to say, we'll be doing this, we take our time doing this, we always make sure you've got this, etc., etc. And they always put the benefits of what their business offers into what we call the positioning conversation, right? So that customer is under no illusions that they are unlikely to be the cheapest, but there's a reason for that. And then they'll always ask, once they've done this positioning statement, they will always ask, does that make sense? You understand there? Can I just ask you a question? Are you buying purely on price, or are you buying an overall package, overall value? And they'll always will come back and say, oh no, it's always overall value. It's not just about price. Whether it is or not, that's another question. So we've got to stop quoting like everybody else does, right? We've got to quote to impress, right? A, Issuing a quote to a customer is not just about issuing prices, as crazy as that sounds, right? When you're issuing a quote, it's all about positioning you as the go-to person, right? The obvious choice within that sector. You're positioning your business. You're not just issuing a price, right? You're issuing a quality statement as well. And I'm going to cover this more in the follow-up process, but we've got some really good examples here of when we're doing these proposals, we email them for speed, right? We always email the quotes and proposals for speed, but we post out what we call a wow pack, right? And I'm going to explain what the wow pack is. It's a game changer, right? An absolute game changer, because very, very few people do this, right? When I ran this live event, over half the people on the call straight away said at the end, it's the wow pack. That's the one thing I'm taking away from this. I'm going to introduce a wow pack, and so will you. Another thing as well is proof beats price, right? Be that key person of influence on your socials, right? With photos and videos and real life testimonials, right? Show that you're the expert, show that you're the trusted advisor, and use the socials to your advantage, right? I always say, the balance between value posts where you're giving away superb advice and really hints and tips. And then the sales posts should be about 80-20, 80% all about value, all about the customer, and limit the actual sales posts. Advice and guidance and help and testimonials are gold in your socials. Let's move on to number three here, feast and famine marketing, right? How many of us can relate to this where we've got peaks and troughs within our marketing? Crazy busy, crazy quiet, right? And what we tend to find is quotes are either coming in with a bucket load or the phone never rings. So what causes this feast and famine marketing and how do we work around it. And it all comes down to one thing: consistent marketing. Consistency is key, right? And of course, knowing who your target market is. And then, of course, we get businesses where they're quiet, they stop marketing because they're trying to save money, or when they're really busy, they stop marketing because they don't want any more work coming in. It's just crazy. I mean, stopping marketing to save money is like stopping your watch to save time. It is utter insanity. The only reason that businesses stop marketing is because they've got no fucking idea what's working. That's the only reason businesses stop marketing, right? So think about this. You're spending £1,000 on marketing, right? And you're doing this much, right? Okay, so this much marketing and it's cost you £1,000. 50% of that's not working. That's fact, right? 50% of that marketing is not working. But you don't know which 50% yet because you're not monitoring, you're not testing and measuring. In today's analytical world, there's no excuse for that. So if you test and measure your marketing, you find out which 50% is not working, guess what happens? You focus on the 50% that is working. So now you're only spending 500 quid a month, but getting the same results or better, and you're only spending this amount of time now. So spending a lot less time, spending a lot less money, and getting better results. Simple, yeah? Erratic acts of marketing never work. Lots of marketing, then nothing. Lots of marketing, then nothing. It just doesn't work. Marketing's got to be consistent, right? And the reason that so many businesses fall foul of this is because of the marketing lag. You're not marketing for today, you're marketing for tomorrow. There's always a lag in marketing, especially in the trades and construction sector. So if you're making a marketing decision based on decisions today, you're impacting your leads for tomorrow. So yes, you might be crazy busy today, so you stop marketing, but you might not be crazy busy in 2 months' time. And guess what? The lead flow has been choked, right? That is why you get this feast and famine in your marketing. And not only that, is it feast and famine, it's also very, very expensive. So consistent marketing is essential for every business. And that might mean possibly every day, certainly every week, ideally every day you're doing something. The marketing never stops, right? But it's a wee bit more complicated than that. Again, this is a good one for the power hour. Your marketing must be targeted. You just can't be pushing out, a generic message to everybody. You try to talk to everybody, you end up talking to nobody. So your marketing's got to be super targeted. You've got to talk to the person, not at them. It's a huge difference, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Most small businesses just throw a lot of shit out there and hope that something sticks, right? That's a strategy from the 80s. Let me tell you, it didn't work back then either. Marketing is linked indirectly or directly to everything that we're going to talk about or have talked about, right? Another thing with marketing as well, and this is where it links with price, if you're projecting an image of cheapness, and you can do that with your branding, you can actually do that subconsciously. Hey, you don't actually have to mention, although Jesus Christ, some people do. We won't be beaten on price. I mean, in hell, man, I can't believe people still put that in their vans, right? If you're projecting an image of cheapness, what kind of customers that going to attract, right? That's why you can't move out of that market, right? Your branding might be working against you. If you project an image of high quality and reliability and trust, is that going to be price conscious customers that attracts? No, of course it's not, right? Price will always be a factor. Of course it will be, especially today, but you've got to make it secondary to value. So who is your target market? Another thing to really consider here, and Charlie Mullins from Pimlico Plumbers did this brilliantly well, is look at the fears, the concerns that your target market audience has got, not with your business, but with your industry, right? And attack them head on. Work out what the fears are, work out what the objections are. And if you can weave them into your marketing message, then it makes the ultimate sale and inquiry a heck of a lot easier. Now, the big thing here I'm going to finish with the marketing side of things is differentiate. If you're the same as me and I'm the same as you and we're both the same as them, what's the customer ultimately going to use to make a decision? Price. Eeny, meeny, miny, price, right? If you differentiate yourself, you're standing head and shoulders above the rest of us, that's who the customer's going to choose. And that's why finding your differentiator, and it's not customer service. I mean, honestly, what makes you different? Customer service. Really? Honestly? Right? Customer service is after the fact. Unless your customer experience is superb, unless your marketing is first class, then they're never going to get to experience your customer service. So customer service is not a differentiator. Hate to break that one to you. And by the way, good customer service is now the minimum standard, not a differentiator. So what makes you really stand out from the crowd? What makes your competitors sit back and go, shit, man, how did they do that? Right? That's your differentiator. Because if your competitors notice it, your customers notice it. So we need to get away from discount. Discounting's bad. Discounting kills our profits. Now, there's two things with discounting. We've got discounts, the obvious one, I'm going to give you money off. Crazy as it is, but we do it. But we've also got discounts in disguise. They are the real business killers. So it's not just the discounting per se, it's watching out for the discounting in disguise. That's the ones we miss. Discounting disguise are actually the ones that we kind of, how can I put this? We actually kid ourselves on that are not a factor, right? So how many of these do you recognize where you cut the cost to win the job, right? So, oh, there's loads of potential here. I'm going to get lots of work from this person, so I'll just cut the cost, right? Okay, yes, you will win the job and you will get lots of business from them, but you'll never make any money because once you cut the cost to win the job, you have now set the benchmark. If you actually think you're going to go back with higher prices, then you are kidding yourself on in most cases. The big one that catches us out is not increasing the price, taking into account the increased costs, right? The volatility in the construction sector, maybe not quite as bad as it was a couple of years ago. Maybe when timber and I mean, every plasterboard, everything was just rocketing in price. It was absolutely crazy, changing almost daily. But we've got fuel crisis. At the time of recording this, we've got a real fuel crisis going on as well. So if we are not increasing our prices to take into account the increased costs to our business, then that's the discount in disguise. And it's all coming off your bottom line. What tends to catch out builders is change orders, right? Being helpful is great. Being helpful is good, right? I'm not saying for 1 minute it's not, but being helpful at a cost is not, right? Can you do this for me? Yeah, okay, I'll do that for you. Could you do this for me? Yeah, okay, I'll do that for you. You've got to be very careful with these change orders because, it might only be 50 or 60 quid, but if it's 50, 60 quid, 10, 11, 12, 20 times, that's a problem. And then, of course, not accounting for the real cost that we talked about, right? Um, and yes, you can kid yourself on and quote for 10 hours, knowing full well it's going to take 15. All look great on paper, but it doesn't look great in reality. So let's look at this discounting matrix here, right? This is the one that usually gets people thinking, geez, right, discounting's not good. So when we start to look at discounting, we always say to any client, you can take a view that low margin is better than no margin, and I get that. So if you're going to discount, because I'm not saying don't discount, sometimes you've got to, it's your business, you've got to take the view sometimes is low margin better than no margin. Your business, your choice. What I want to share with you here is knowing the full impact of it. Okay. So if you've got a business making a 25% margin, let's look what happens when you offer a 10% discount. So we've got margin along the top and we've got the discount down the left hand side. So if you're going to offer a 25%, so if you're going to offer a 10% discount on a 25% margin, you've got to sell 67% more just to make the same profit before the discount. Okay, think about that. 25% margin, you offer a 10% discount, you've now got to sell 67% more just to make the same. Staying on 25% margin, look what happens when you offer a 20% discount. 10% is 67% more, 20% is 400% more. This should now start to get the alarm bells going of just how corrosive discounting can actually be. And one way around discounting is to find your own niche market. Find your niche market and own it, right? Make it less about price, less about discounting. Niche is good because you become the market leader in that sector. So over the last year or so, I've seen some really good businesses niche well, right? And how can I put this? What happens when they niche into a particular area, right? Over time, with their marketing, with their socials, with their social proof, testimonials, etc., they become the go-to person. They become the expert in that field, the trusted advisor, if you like, right? And people will always pay for that level of expertise, regardless of what industry and sector you're in. So here's some real life examples. A general builder that got sick of building garden walls and bits and pieces and not making any profit. They moved into chimney repairs and restorations more for older properties, so Victorian style properties. So who do you think became the expert in that market? Who are you going to call? The renewable energy firm that got sick and tired of trying to compete for new build homes, right? Decided to focus on the higher end of the market with retrofits, right? So who are you going to call there? Because there's no two doubts about it. There's a huge skill set there. And when you become the expert in that particular field, you're not giving any problems getting leads. And both those examples, when those businesses started to niche, right, and focus less on this and less on this and more on that, guess what happens? Incoming inquiries rocketed, right? The best one though was a general joiner, right, that did everything, right, and literally, seriously, did have on the van, no job too big, no job too small. Could you be any more vague than that, right? So he moved away from all that and he focused on one niche market and he owned it. And to this day, he owns it. And he started to build home offices. With this huge surge in people working from home, he now specializes in converting small spaces in a bedroom, in a spare room, under the stairs, a cupboard, a basement, a garage, whatever it might be. He now very, very cleverly takes the most ridiculous small space and turns it into a nice, workable home office. Right? This guy is fully booked for about 9 months solid. But guess what? His marketing never stops because he knows that the pipeline needs to keep going. Do you think he quotes and wins on price? Not a chance. Do you think he discounts? Never. That's the power of niche. Now, we've talked about discounting. Let's flip that. A 5% increase can actually mean a 50% increase in profit. How the hell is that even possible? A 5% increase in price can mean a 50% increase in profit. Let me show you. So let's look at this business with a £200,000 turnover. And that could be a small business, 200,000 a year. It could be for the big business, 200,000 a month, or it could be a really big business, 200,000 a week. It doesn't matter. Let's look what happens when we increase our prices. So we've got this £200,000 turnover business, 10% net profit. So that's after everything's paid, 20,000 profit. 200,000 turnover, 10% net profit, £20,000 profit. This business goes and increases the price by just 5%. That takes the turnover up from 200 to 210. It's an extra 10k of turnover by increasing the prices by 5%. But no other costs in the business have increased. It's only the price that's increased. No other costs. All the costs have stayed the same. So there's no additional costs attributed to that increase in turnover. There's no extra sales, so there's no extra costs. It's only a price increase of only 5%. But that 5% increase takes the profit from 20% to 20,000 rather to 30,000 because that full 10 grand goes right into the profit, right? So the 20,000 increases by 50% to 30,000, a 50% bump in profit. That is how a simple small price increase can start to filter down onto your bottom line. So I go right back to the start. I'm really busy, but how am I not making money? Let's start to look at what you're charging. Let's start to look at your gross profit. And let's start to look at your net profit. Then we'll be able to determine why you're crazy busy and don't have enough money left in the bank. Now, I talked about this at the start. The money has been left on the table with a follow-up. This is where the wow pack comes in. So think about this. Let's think about business. You have spent lots of time, lots of effort on your marketing, right? You've been thinking about the campaigns, you've been running the campaigns, coming up with some ideas. You've then run the campaigns, you've paid for them. Um, there's no such thing as free marketing. Let's just nail that right now. Free marketing does not exist unless you value your time at zero. And if you do, that's just ludicrous, right? So there's no such a thing as free marketing. So you've invested all that time, all that money. You've then managed to get these inquiries, these leads coming in, and you've spent some time qualifying them. You've managed those leads to become qualified leads. You've then dealt with the inquiry. You've then issued a quote. Oh, that's a lot of work. And you've got that potential client now interested in that quote's out there. And then it stops. You've done all that work and you don't follow it up because you assume, well, if they want it, they'll give us a call. Well, they might, but most won't, right? If they do want it, they won't call you. They'll go with the business that called them. So we do a follow-up process. Now I'm going to run through a generic one here. Again, use the power of it. What we've got here is a 6-touch follow-up process. Now this was created maybe a couple of years ago. The businesses that use this, every single one say it works, especially the Wow Pack. And what I would say now with just the way the market changes is 6 touches is probably not enough, right? So what is the 6-touch follow-up process? Well, touch point number 1 is the initial conversation. That's the easy one, right? That's where you're having let's say the advanced conversation. So it's not the initial inquiry, it's the advanced conversation with with your client, right? So you're agreeing to go to the next level, whatever that may be. And that usually takes you on to touch point number 2. And touch point number 2 is actually issuing the quote itself. And we do that by email for speed, right? Now, what we do here is there's a couple of things that come into play. And this is why doing this on a one-to-one basis is so good, because I can explain this in a lot more detail. What we do here is we start to put a number of things into play. So if I'm working with you, you've made that initial inquiry, we've had a conversation, we've agreed to issue a quote. I'll say something like this to you. Really appreciate the opportunity to quote for this. What day's today? Today's Thursday. I'll get that quote out to you on Monday. Is that okay? And you always ask for that permission, right? And the customer will go, yeah, that'd be fine, that'd be great. But I know in my head I'm going to get the quote out earlier than that. So if I'm telling them it's going to be Monday, I know they're getting it Friday. If I'm telling them it's going to be Friday, I know they're getting it on Thursday. They're always going to get that quote earlier than I have told them, right? Because I want to come across as being the person that is professional, the person that's reliable, right? Because let me tell you this right now, what goes through a customer's head. If you can't be arsed getting the quote out in time and it's late, then it's haphazard, then if that's what you like at the sales process, the customer's thinking, holy shit, what do you like in the after sales process? Just saying. So we get the touch point number 2, we get that quote emailed out, we do that with speed. Now we come to the magic. Touch point number 3. Touch point number 3 is the Wow Pack. And At the same time, we are emailing the quote. So let's say today's Wednesday. So we're emailing the quote out to the client. We're also posting the wow pack. We've not told the customer anything about this. And the wow pack is the same quote printed out, maybe put into a nice document folder, but there is a gift. Right now, gift. When I'm talking about gifts, I'm not talking about a ruler or a pen or water bottle. Christ, with your logo on it. It's a nice, subtle gift, right? And the one that got I would say the best feedback was a home builder that was working with up in the north of Scotland. And they sent out this lovely box of handmade shortbread with a tartan bow, and it's a little handwritten note. Thanks for the opportunity to quote, and they would sign it, and they would put that in with the quote. So when the pack came out, it was quite bulky. It's called lumpy mail, um, and curiosity kicks in. The customer's like, "Oh, what's this?" Opens up, "Oh, that's really nice. Geez, look at that." And the reason we know this works is we get to touch point number 4, which is the first phone call, the first follow-up phone call. Touch point number 4 is we're only asking if the quote was received. Hi, I appreciate the opportunity to quote to call on you to make sure you've received our proposal. Okay. And this is when the touch point number 3 works with the wow pack, because the customer, the prospect will always come out and go, "Yeah, I got that this morning. It came in yesterday, whatever it was. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks for that." They always, always, always refer to receiving the wow pack. That's how you know it works. So that's touch point number 4. Not been intrusive at all, has it? Now, at touch point number 4, it's almost certain that the customer will not have received all their quotes, etc. So what you want to do at touch point number 4 is position touch point number 6, which is the second follow-up call. So you'll say to the customer, "I appreciate you're still waiting for some other quotes and proposals to come in. Today's Wednesday. I'll give you a call back on Monday around 2 o'clock. Is that okay?" So we're asking for permission again, right? Yeah, that'd be fine. That'd be great. So you've now got permission for that touch point number 6. Touch point number 5 is simply an email in between those 2 follow-up calls, right? And that's just usually a light touch email. Great to talk to you last week. If there's anything else I can do in the meantime, just get in touch with you. Otherwise, look forward to speaking to you on XY date at XY time. Just a little reminder that you're going to be giving them a call for that second follow-up call. Touch point number 6 is again that second phone call. Dead easy, isn't it? Now, here's the thing. When you're at touch point number 6, that's the second phone call. Chances are, almost certainly, you're the only one that's gone that far, right? You're now in pole position to close that deal. How you do that is entirely up to you, right? But the client prospect will have had all their quotes. They'll now be in a position to buy. So you're now in pole position to close that deal. Depending what happens next, you want to add on other touch points. If they're not ready, if they're still waiting for a straggler to come in, if they're still waiting for maybe a building warrant or planning, there could be a whole load of reasons why they're not quite ready to go, right? Do not stop there. Do not pat yourself in the back saying, "Yeah, well, okay, I was last to have the conversation." Do not stop there. Keep the follow-up process going. Add your own touch point 7, touch point 8, touch point 9, depending on what time frame it is. And mix it up. This is a really important one. Communicate with the customer how they want to be communicated, right? So if you think of all the kind of popular communication channels we've got the phone, which is the best one, bar none, but we've got the phone. We've also got email, worst one, bar none, right? So ideally phone them, email's the least preferred one because they're just too easy to ignore, right? So we've got phone, we've got email, that's 2 comms. But we've also got WhatsApp, we've also got text messaging, right? We've also got LinkedIn messaging, we've got Facebook Messenger, etc., right? So however your client prefers to communicate, use that in your follow-up process. If it's WhatsApp, use WhatsApp. Whether you like it or not is irrelevant. Personally, I can't stand WhatsApp, right? Because there is just this intense expectation of instantaneous responses. right? So I'm not a WhatsApp fan, but if I've got clients that use WhatsApp, I'll use WhatsApp. That's simple because it's not about me, it's about them. So that is what you've got to do in your follow-up process. Why does this work? How does this work? We're doing a lot of things here behind the scenes, right? There's a lot of not going woo-woo here, but there's a lot of psychology coming into play here. Right at the start, we are showing that we're professional and we're reliable by getting that first initial email quote out, right, early. We're telling you you're getting it here, but you're actually getting it here. So we're under promising and over delivering. That's us planting the first subliminal seed. When we send out the wow pack, we're now really building know, like, and trust because nobody else is doing this. Right? We're now really differentiating ourselves. We're now setting ourselves above the norm. Right? We're always asking for permission for the next step. Um, is it okay? I'll give you a call back on Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Is that okay? Right? Now, sometimes they might actually say, actually, no, it's not. I'm away on holiday. But what suits you then? This is a great way, right, to make sure that your next call is taken. It's also professional. It's nice. Always ask for permission for the next step, right? We're also making damn sure we are the last one having the conversation. So think about this whole follow-up process. We're the first to get the quote out, and we're the last to be speaking to them. We're the last to have the conversation. Add all this up, mix in a couple of WhatsApp messages, calls, social media if it needs to be, your conversion rate's going to rocket. That's why the power hour is so important, right? Use the power hour. Let's build your follow-up process if nothing else. That's the one that's going to make a huge difference. So I've covered a few of the generic topics there. There's another couple of things to think about as well. That the power hour really comes into play here. And I do not cover these topics when I'm doing the live workshops because A, they're far more bespoke, but some of these things are also a bit more confidential, right? If we start talking numbers and things, some people are a bit reluctant to talk about that in an open forum. So these are great topics for the power hour. Recruiting and retaining, right? It's really difficult to get good people now, right? So we've got to be clever at the way we recruit, but we've got to be fantastic at retaining people once we actually get good people on board. And you will get good people on board, right? And we always look when we're doing recruiting, we always look at the business because no one wants to work for a chaotic business, right? Getting the best means being the best, right? And when I was doing a live workshop, one of one of the attendees said that he saw a recruitment advert going out that finished off by saying, "No zombies. Zombies need not apply." Right, and everybody thought that was actually quite funny because okay, we've maybe all been in this situation where we've had a less than engaged employee. But I looked at that ad and I thought, if I was a skilled tradesperson, right, I would not be applying for that job. If you've got a business there that's quite happy to call their employees zombies, I'm sorry, but that's not a business I want to work for. Right. So all this comes into play when we're looking at recruiting people. So if you want to recruit the best people want to work for the best businesses. Right. If your business is totally chaotic, right, what kind of people is that going to attract? Right. So when we start to look at recruiting, we actually look at the business before we look at recruiting. And then we look at ways to retain. The next one we come across a lot is the business is me, and it ain't much fun. Now, this is especially in trades, this is a real problem, right? When you're 100% on the tools, nothing in your business is ever going to change. Just being totally honest, right? If you're 100% on the tools, nothing is ever going to change. That is it. That's your business. That's your life. That's it, right? The only way it's going to change is if you change. If you throttle back and work less in the business and more on it, then you start to work on systems, processes, marketing, right? All the stuff that actually makes a business, because just now it's just a job, right? If you're working 100% on the tools, we need to start looking at ways to make that 95% on the tools, 90% on the tools, 80% on the tools, and do it gradually. Cash flow and finances is always going to be there. The figures may not be the most exciting thing in the world. Accounts might not float your boat, but it's absolutely crucial, right? Nobody would build a house without a plan, right? So why would you run a business without a plan? Why would you run a business without a cash flow, right? So we spend a bit of time on that. Systems and processes, especially just now with so much AI, right? Systems, processes, where do I start? I don't know where to start, right? You'll not believe how small changes can start the ball rolling. Yes, you might need 200 systems and processes, so it becomes overwhelming. But let's build one. Let's build two, right? Let's start the journey. Technology and AI, we dive into that a lot as well. A lot of small businesses in trades and construction feel they're really missing out big time, and they possibly are. I was on a training event with an AI business again that focuses in the construction sector, and it was about an hour and a half. And what he said at the end of it, he said the technology that we talked about right at the start's probably out of date now, such as the pace of change in tech. Right? I thought, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Um, but you'd be blown away by it. How admin tasks, sales tasks, marketing tasks can all be assisted, not replaced, but assisted by AI. It really is a game changer. And then the final one I like to look at is how do I build an asset that's sellable? That's probably my main area of expertise is getting businesses ready for an exit, a longer term exit, because that's what you should be striving towards, right? Yes, you want to have a decent salary and a decent living today, but you're really building an asset that's going to add to your retirement, to your pension, to your quality of life at the end of it. And the sooner you start that, the better. It's never too early to start exit planning, but it can be too late. So we always have one eye on building a sellable asset. And that really has been everything that we cover in building for growth. Covered a heck of a lot in this recording, right? But the whole point now is to use the power hour to focus on the one or two key topics for you. So what are you going to do for building for growth? I hope that helps. Look forward to hearing from you. Feedback's always appreciated, but book that power hour. Thanks for listening. I really do hope that helped.